Hello, everyone, and welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt. This is episode number 293, and in just a few moments, I'll be sharing with you an interview I did with Dr. Leslie Kernisan, who is a geriatrician who just came out with a new book called When Your Aging Parent Needs Help, and it's a fantastic guidebook full of lots of helpful resources, and that's why I'm really excited to share it with you, because I'm sure there are people out there listening who could benefit from having the book on hand and also giving it to other people who may need this information. So I'll be sharing that interview in just a few moments. But first, a couple of announcements. As I look at the calendar, I can see it is now the month of April 2021. The year's going by so quickly already for me. I don't know if that's true for you, but April is the month when every year we celebrate National Healthcare Decisions Day on the 16th of the month. For this year, I am partnering with Vital Decisions on their campaign to pick a proxy and plant a tree. So you can join me in doing three things this month as part of the campaign. First of all, choose your healthcare proxy to be your voice in a medical crisis. Number two, speak with that person about your wishes and make sure they agree to be your healthcare proxy. And then number three, you can go to the Vital Decisions site on the mylivingvoice.com page, create a free account and document your wishes there. If you do this before the end of the month, before April 30th, a tree will be planted to honor your step forward. So pick a proxy and plant it forward this April, and I'm definitely going to be doing that myself. Also, my next announcement is that on April 25th, Sunday, April 25th, I will be hosting a virtual workshop with Ben Kintish. He is the writer of the Life Review, the hospice musical that I just interviewed recently. And Ben is going to put together a workshop for us on grieving and growing together with stories and songs, and he'll be including more songs from the musical and lots of great stories from his work as a hospice chaplain. So that will be Sunday, April 25th, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can come to the show notes for this episode, eolupodcast.com. Look for episode 293, and you'll find the links there to register for this workshop. There is a charge for the workshop, but it's a fundraiser. Half the proceeds are going to the Denver Hospice, the other half to Life Review, the hospice musical, to help the musical be shown to more audiences. So that's it for the announcements for today. And now we'll move on to my interview with Dr. Leslie Kernisan. And as always, stay tuned. After the interview, I'll come back with a few takeaways and to say goodbye. So here we go. Today, I'm very happy to welcome my special guest, Dr. Leslie Kernisan. She is a practicing geriatrician and the founder of the popular aging health website and podcast, Better Health While Aging, which she created to help families and older adults learn better ways to manage common aging health challenges. She is also a clinical instructor at the University of California, San Francisco Division of Geriatrics. Her first book was Better Digital Health for Aging, an industry guide, and today we will be discussing her brand new book, When Your Aging Parent Needs Help, a geriatrician's step-by-step guide to memory loss, resistance, safety worries, and more. And you can find out more at her website, betterhealthwhileaging.net. So, Dr. Leslie, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I really am excited to talk to you more about your book, which is actually very wonderful and amazing resource. But I was hoping you'd start by just telling us a little bit more about yourself. What inspired you to go into geriatrics as a specialty? And then what led to writing this book?
Yeah, so what inspired me to go into geriatrics was that from the very beginning of medical school, I was actually really interested in the care of the whole person and in primary care, and in why the healthcare system seemed so tilted against it, actually. So I started off with a lot of interest in both practicing primary care and in wanting to make primary care better. And then when I was doing my residency in internal medicine and I was in a special program focused on primary care, I realized that the people who were both the most interesting to me and also most in need of a really comprehensive person-centered approach were older people because they had multiple chronic conditions at the same time, but often because their lives were shifting in this way that I thought was really interesting, where often families did become involved, where their health and well-being was often tied to things that were not strictly medical. And also where I would see a lot of great themes of human life playing out, in terms of relationships and revisiting those and interdependence and, and obviously confronting, mortality and illness and finding ways to make the best of things and find a lot of beauty in life, even as they were often adapting to a lot of difficulties. So that's what drew me to geriatrics. And it's been a great fit. And so then in geriatrics, I was in graduate school studying quality measures and the quality of primary care for older adults, which often is not great. And somebody approached me and said, "Oh, I work for a new website that's for boomers worried about aging parents. Would you like to answer questions?" And one of the things that I especially loved in my practice as a geriatrician for primary care was educating patients and families, helping people better understand their health and sort of participate in it in a more meaningful way. So I said, well, yes, if there's a great new resource, I definitely want to know about it, tell people about it, and contribute. And when I looked at the site, I was not that impressed by the health information. It was very stock, disease-based, kind of what we would tell people, who had only that disease if they were 40. But I thought as an opportunity to help people, it was amazing because, of course, people go to the internet with their questions and they look for answers. And I thought people have questions, older people have questions about their health and people have questions about their aging parents or other older relatives. And what if they found things that, were written by us as geriatricians? We could teach geriatrics to the public, basically, because, they often say the most important member of the healthcare team is, the patient and family. So that really changed my career. And ever since, I've spent a large part of my time writing about geriatrics for the public online. And so the book is, my website came out of that, and now the book is, part of that as well.
Well, the book is really a wonderful resource, and I'm very excited to see it and to see that you created it and put it out there, because having been a caregiver for my own mom before she died, I realized how much I could have used a lot of the information and advice that you offer in your book. And one thing I really like are the tools and the cheat sheets that you've included in the book.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. Well, actually, to just come back to the book was the result of, on Better Health While Aging, I would write articles just answering, common questions or common challenges that I knew came up either for family caregivers or related to older people's health. But the book came from people asking over and over again a certain kind of question that I felt like I couldn't answer in an article, which was often something like, well, I've noticed that my older parent is becoming forgetful, or often it's more doing something that they find worrisome, spending in a worrisome way, or driving difficulties, or maybe falls. And, and I told them they should get help and they're refusing. And so people would write in over and over again with some variation of that. And sometimes say, I heard there's nothing you can do if they won't accept it. And I felt like, well, no, there are ways to approach this. And so the book was a nice way to take something that I felt like really required a bunch of steps, or putting together a bunch of resources that were already on the site, because often at this point, it's a transition for the family when a parent has been independent and now seems to be showing signs of decline, but the parent is not used to getting help or accepting help or involving their family. The family members have not yet developed the skills to step in. And I realized that, making that transition, I think as doctors, we've all had a lot of people come in with their family members, but there's often that transition moment for the ones who haven't been used to that. And I wanted to speak to that. So yes, I did try to kind of write out a process, and then for each piece of it, create cheat sheets, like, here are the cognitive symptoms to look at, or here are, the things that we would assess at home to see, like, are they really having so much difficulty that it's a problem or becoming unsafe? And the goal is obviously not to make people their own doctor, but again, to give them the tools so that they can more easily get help from the right people.
And one thing you write about is how to do a better job communicating with our aging parents. And that really struck me because I recognized some mistakes I made with my mom. I say it now in retrospect.
Oh, well, everybody does. And even us as providers, we do, because it's different when it's our parent.
Yeah.
But you were saying?
Yeah, it's really different. Well, I mean, it turns out like this big conflict my mother and I had were over throw rugs, which she had all over her house. And she loved very much. And I wanted her to get rid of those. I saw them as a safety issue. And I kept bringing her facts and studies and saying, you have this much likelihood of tripping and falling on one of your rugs and breaking your hip. And we were just at loggerheads with each other over the issue of those rugs. And what I understood from reading what you wrote about communication is that I was not seeing her values and respecting her values for things that she cared about. And that really touched me. You said that there's sometimes an interplay between a person's independence and their willingness to take risks in order to stay independent. And somehow I guess those rugs were a symbol of my mom's independence.
Yes. That is such a common conflict. Well, first of all, I think, again, even though so many of us will end up concerned about our aging parent and often, getting involved in their health or well-being, people usually are not coached or, trained or supported in learning how to do this. And so, yes, there's kind of, and this is one of the things that I realized, over the years writing the website, is that I started off by giving all this factual information. And then people would write in and say, yes, but how do I get my parent to do it? Mm-hmm. And so I realized that, there's this whole other aspect of it, which is part of, practicing geriatrics, the art and science of modifying healthcare for older adults. But it is in the how we bring something up to a person and explore what they might be amenable to and, find a way forward. And I'm sure you applied many of those skills too as a family practitioner. And so I thought, well, we also need to help people kind of reframe, first of all, what their role should be, because otherwise adult children often assume that their role is to go in there and keep the person safe and give them information. And that just tends to not be super constructive. So yes, in the book, the way we organize it is that the first part is called taking stock, where we both give people the tools to observe and really try to document, the certain signs that might be worrisome. But there's another part that's, get your parents' take. And these are skills that I learned in training in geriatrics and in palliative care, that before you make a recommendation to someone, stop and learn more about how do they see it. What were they thinking was concerning or important about the situation? What's important to them in general, because then we can later use that information, first of all, as part of us deciding how important is it for me to step in and, try to get them to change what they're doing. But also it gives us tools to propose our suggestions in more effective ways. And so, yes, that's part of the step-by-step is, again, giving people some step-by-step suggestions on how to, first of all, better explore how their parent is seeing the safety issue. And then if they decide they do want to try to push their parent to make a change, better ways to bring that up.
And maybe we could talk more about this idea of communication and apply it to a situation that I think is arising for many people right now around the COVID vaccine. Mm-hmm. And what would you suggest to people whose parents are reluctant to get the vaccine? How might they have a productive conversation around that?
Yeah. So, I think what we have in, the book could be used for that as well. And certainly when COVID came along, at Better Health While Aging, we started to get a lot of questions. I mean, initially it was, my parents aren't observing COVID precautions. How do I get them to wear a mask and not go out to protect themselves? And now I think it's turned into, more about the vaccine. But, the general approach that I suggest to people is always, that first of all, if your parent won't do something, to step back a little bit and say, well, let me start by, first of all, stepping back and trying to understand better how they see it and what their perspective is on it. So to kind of be curious about it. When we ask people why, it tends to make them defensive. Whereas if they say something like that, I don't want to get it, we can start by saying, well, we can first of all, validate and allow them to have their opinion without necessarily agreeing, but, say, oh, okay, sounds like you're not planning to get it. And then we can say, well, I'd love to understand that better. Tell me a little bit more. And what we're trying to ideally get at is understand kind of what's their thinking behind it. And also ideally, what are they afraid of? Because often there is like a fear or worry. And what is it that they want? What are they hoping will happen? So that's what I would say for the COVID vaccine, is to start with that. And the other thing that I often encourage people to do is just consider whether there are any memory or thinking problems, just because that might affect our expectations of how the person is going to perceive things or be amenable to negotiating it later. So I encourage people to, start with that. And then I remind people that unless your parent is very cognitively impaired, they have the right to make their decisions, and that we often have to accept that people we love, might make decisions that we disagree with. But once we have heard more about what their perspective is, we might be able to gently propose something. And especially if we can propose it as a way for them to attain something that is important to them. So if it's important to stay well for the grandchildren, we could frame it that way. If it's, I would feel so much better. But people are more receptive to those suggestions once they feel like they've been heard and not ridiculed for their beliefs or opinions or priorities.
I really like that idea. And then that actually pointed out to me that I don't value throw rugs, and I didn't really understand why my mom valued them. And it would have been so helpful if I had just stopped to ask her about that. Like, why does she like these rugs so much? And what do they mean to her? That would have been really helpful. But one thing that I enjoyed or appreciated in the book is that you have a chapter called What to Say Take Two, because acknowledging that oftentimes we don't say the things we wish we had said. Oftentimes we do stumble when we're trying to have these conversations.
Yes. I think in general, there are so many difficult emotions that come up when you're worried about an older parent. And that sometimes, people can also beat up on themselves and feel like if their parent is still unsafe, it's their fault. If their parent doesn't listen to them, it's their fault. Or if they had just said the right things, this would be fixed. And so part of what I try to convey in the book is that it's a process. You should really be expecting a series of conversations, that we're all human and we do the best we can. And that often we go back again. That's just kind of the nature of it. And to, kind of give themselves some grace and some patience. And that, I think, being on this journey is really not about getting your parent to a place of perfect safety where you feel reassured and in people's ideal world, their parent is also happy and appreciative of all these efforts. It's really showing up and continuing to make your best effort to connect with your parent and offer assistance. And that's often, not entirely in your control whether they're going to accept that assistance or suggestion. And that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that's, the nature of things. They may want different things than you do.
Exactly. And you pointed out that my need to help my parent may go against my parents' wish and desire for their own life. And that, as you said, unless they're at a place where they don't have the capacity or the competence to make their own decisions, they have a right to make their choices. And it's up to me to learn how to accept that.
Yeah, that's part of the process too. So we did write specific, sample phrases that people could take, and then yes, recognizing that often you're going to go back and attempt to have another conversation. We have the take two part of it. So yeah, I'm not trained, as a therapist, but we have actually been coaching family members on these strategies for a few years now at Better Health While Aging. And a lot of people find that it helps. And again, there are strategies based on, what I noticed that we were routinely doing in geriatrics or in palliative care, that often people didn't necessarily need more explanation or logic. They needed space and they needed to feel heard, and they needed kind of their underlying concerns or priorities to be acknowledged and often respected.
Yes, that makes so much sense. All of us need that really, but I can see with advancing age, our older parents are beginning to have some fears that they may not be capable of everything they want to do. They're facing a lot of losses and a lot of changes in their lives. And so it makes sense that we be respectful of that and be willing to be gentle and to listen and hear what they need to say.
Yes. And I should add that doing that it's taxing, for the adult child to show up that way. So we also, encourage people to find other spaces for venting and for support because this is not easy to do. I mean, many, of us have to kind of learn different ways of approaching our parent or talking to our parent. And people are often doing this, in the context of very busy lives, right? Adult children usually, are also juggling jobs, and they may have their own children at home or other responsibilities. And I think these approaches work, and they also, require effort and patience. And so we also encourage people, remind them that, to be able to show up this way, you need to also, try to find time to give yourself some ideally rest. I know it's hard. People often don't have much time to rest, but you need to kind of fill your own cup a little bit and find other spaces. And I'm a huge fan of support groups where you can, vent about your worries and your frustrations, and then get, encouragement and reminders of how you can try again next time.
Mm-hmm. And dealing with these issues with our parents can bring up a lot of our probably old emotions from conflicts from the past, but also other family issues, perhaps with other siblings. And I can see how it becomes much more about just dealing with the parent, but it could be other family members who get involved in the conflicts.
Oh, yes. For sure. I think all the underlying family issues tend to emerge, at times when people are worried about an aging parent. So, yeah, that's, part of the challenge too.
Well, I also really liked that you included how to approach doctors, because I think it's so important. I often would talk to my patients about, you need to know how to visit the doctor and what to ask for and how to talk to the doctor, because most people in our society don't. And it seems to me they're intimidated by going to a doctor, and they end up not even getting most of their questions answered during their visits.
Yeah, very true. No, it's true. And in geriatrics, we have the kind of additional problem that there's like overwhelming, lots of research that older adults often don't get what would be considered ideal care when they visit health providers, and that the average health provider, general internist or family medicine doctor, or even some of the specialists, when approached with common age-related syndromes like cognitive issues or falls, often doesn't provide the ideal evaluation and recommendations unless they're prompted to do so by, a kind of proactive family or patient. So yes, I have heard from so many people over the years that once they finally got their parent into the doctor, the doctor either said, well, what do you expect? It's just aging, or it didn't do anything, or said your parent's fine, or sometimes said, yes, it's Alzheimer's, when, it didn't seem like a lot of evaluation had been done, and that really shouldn't just be presumed. So we also wanted to give readers the tools to understand what the doctors ideally should be doing and what they can ask for. And I think in general, people who have not spent a lot of time in the healthcare system, can be overly optimistic about the provider's ability to provide care that's in line with, recommendations. But people who have been there, I think, have often experienced how, been dissatisfied with their encounters. And so we wanted to give them tools so that they'd be more likely to get the useful things out of those encounters. And to be fair to the providers, I mean, your average frontline provider right now has to practice under conditions that are really difficult, often extremely pressured for time and not enough resources, not enough training. So, I really lay it at the feet of the system rather than the individual providers. But these older parents and their families, are within the system we have right now. So I'm also an advocate for improving the system, but while that's in the works, I think about how can we give people tools so that they can more successfully get what they need from the system.
Yeah, I like that you even included a template for a letter if the parent refuses to have their child come along. Mm-hmm. You could actually send them in with a letter to express to the doctor what the concerns were.
Yes, although, that's interesting because that is an option, but there we actually had somebody on Better Health While Aging report to us that they did that, and the provider then in the visit with the parent said, tell your daughter that she shouldn't be writing me letters. It's a HIPAA violation. And I can't say I was completely surprised, but, this is a provider that, and some of them are out there who, again, doesn't understand HIPAA. HIPAA, means that people who are covered entities, providers like you and me, insurance companies, have to protect a person's, personal information. But, your average family member is not subject to HIPAA. They definitely have the right to disclose information to the provider. Now, the provider, cannot necessarily then tell that family member, here's what I think is going on, right?
Yeah.
And so there I thought, well, that's really a shame because that's somebody who doesn't understand HIPAA. And, providers get discretion on what they report to their patients. And I thought it was really too bad that provider didn't exercise some discretion because, of course, it was upsetting to the older parents. And it's always I think, something that should be considered very carefully. Are you going to tell, your parents' doctors something if it looks like your parents don't want you to? But I certainly have been approached many times over the years by families doing this. You probably have too. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think, the nature of the work. And I, of course, realized that, well, I can't then just blab everything about the person's health history to their child. But I can certainly take that into account and think about, will this change what I ask my patient about? And it might.
Well, I think as a doctor, the observations and concerns of a close family member can be extremely valuable too, because it's hard to tell just within the context of a 15-minute visit with a patient everything that's going on with them. And so I think it is really essential that we get other feedback from other people if they're able to, and if the patient's willing to have them weigh in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's considered essential as part of evaluating a concern of cognitive impairment is that you get information from knowledgeable informants because, people who may have cognitive impairment cannot be counted upon to provide all the accurate information about what they're having difficulty with at home. And you are supposed to assess, functional abilities. Are they still able to, do their daily home tasks, learn things, do things that they used to do, like plan meals, manage their finances. And usually you do have to go outside the patient encounter. You have to ask other people. So.
And do you find that sometimes family members are a little bit in denial about the decline of their parents, not wanting to see it or just having a hard time recognizing it? Because it seems to me in that case, the cheat sheets that you've provided would be really helpful for just waking up and recognizing the changes that are happening.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of, I think people are often quite unclear on what is normal aging and what is cause for concern and how concerned they should be, and also what should be done with that concern. And people have sometimes gotten the message that there's nothing to do, so there's no point in getting an evaluation. There's no treatment. they may have heard messages like that. So yes, again, the cheat sheets, we started making cheat sheets a while back on better health while aging. But, in terms of symptoms and what to worry about, people often have this feeling that these things are wrong. And so helping them spell out, like, what exactly are you noticing or not noticing, can, I think, help crystallize things for themselves, but is also really invaluable to us as health providers. Because sometimes people are making a mountain out of a molehill. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's definitely true. And other times they have either not realized that something is significant or, there may be some denial about it because it's distressing to realize that somebody you love might be changing in a way that's really going to affect them and your family. And people can have a lot of concerns, especially when it comes to memory loss and conditions like Alzheimer's and related dementias, because they may know people who went through that and, have seen that evolution. And it just creates a lot of fear and anxiety for people. So, yeah, I think it's definitely true.
And you write about cases when there is dementia present. The patient might be experiencing paranoia, which can really interfere with the relationship with their adult children too. And so I wondered what suggestions you have in that situation.
Yeah, so that's, also something that we get lots of questions about on Better Health While Aging is an older person who is making a lot of accusations. That's often really hurtful or stressful for family, accusing family members of stealing things or taking things. Sometimes they're accusing a spouse of infidelities, or sometimes they have what the family feels are, irrational beliefs or fears that somebody is coming in the house, that somebody is doing things. And so this often creates a lot of stress for people. So one of the things I want to say is that these kinds of paranoias and delusions are very common in early dementia, and they can be caused by other conditions. They can be caused by medication side effects. They can be caused by certain metabolic conditions. So again, I always, start off by telling people, well, you want to make sure that this has been brought to the attention of the health providers and get an evaluation for it. And there's also, how do you deal with the older person's paranoid behaviors or what they're saying in the moment. And so what we emphasize over and over again is to, first of all, stop trying to explain it. What most people will fall into is trying to explain to their parent why this thing isn't true or couldn't possibly be true, or why their parent doesn't have to worry. And unfortunately, the explanations do not work. And so instead, what we encourage people to do is, again, what your parent needs in that moment is empathy rather than explanations. They need to be met kind of where they are. You generally cannot correct their reality, but you can kind of acknowledge their feeling and then try to provide some reassurance and perhaps shift their attention to something else. So for somebody who insists that this person, stole this thing, rather than explaining, no, Mom, you're the one who put it here, or it's not possible, nobody's come in the house all day, is, to acknowledge the emotion. It sounds like you've been looking for this, or we're frustrated. Here it is right now. What shall we do with it? Or, otherwise shifting their attention. And these are part of dementia communication skills. So even as you're waiting for the evaluation, because again, could be something else, and that will get better, those techniques to not insist on reality and to just try to help the person feel like heard and like they're being taken seriously without necessarily feeding it too much, whatever is the false belief. But people want to feel heard. They want to feel loved and respected. And then if you can divert their attention to something else, that's helpful. And then to remind yourself that it's not personal. It feels very personal, but that this is something going on in their brain. It's really not about you. It's not about how much they love you or not. It's something going on in their brain. And while you're pursuing that evaluation, stop the explanations and shift to connecting, reassurance, and redirecting their attention if you can.
That's excellent advice. And you mentioned the possibility of medication side effects, and I wanted to go into that a little bit because I've read that older people here in the U.S., the average person takes something like 10 different prescription medications.
Yes.
And I feel like that's so important for people to think about and to make sure they're asking their doctor to evaluate the medications for any potential side effects they might be having.
Yeah, no, they certainly should. But there again, I think, the more you do your own preparation ahead of time, because we know that doctors are often prescribing medications that, for instance, affect memory and thinking, even to people who, have brought up that concern to their doctor or whose families have brought up that concern. And there too, we have articles on Better Health While Aging about the most common medications we look out for. So asking, about certain medications specifically, or looking for a geriatric pharmacist, or even actually a pharmacist, starting with a pharmacist to just, go through each medication. Could this be affecting, memory or thinking, or falls? Those are probably the two biggies that we're often looking out for. I mean, there are definitely other ways in which medications can have side effects or harm older people. But in geriatrics, we're often looking at the effect on fall risk and on memory and thinking, because those are the ones that can be easily overlooked by other providers who aren't in our specialty.
Yeah, and that play a big role in quality of life for the patient as well.
Yes, definitely. So
yeah, I think some patients might be seeing more than one doctor as well, and it's possible the doctors don't know all of the prescriptions the patient has, or patients might be continuing a prescription they were supposed to have stopped.
There are so many ways it can go awry. And there too, people often assume that all the doctors are in touch with each other. They're not. They assume that the medication list in the doctor's computer is up to date. And often it's not. I mean, the doctor might assume that the medication list the patient brought in is accurate, but I've often found that if I actually ask people to bring in their medications in a bag, or if I go to their house, it's different, because it's hard to keep those lists up to date. And so yes, the more double checking things you learn to do yourself as a proactive patient or family, the better. The downside, though, is that I feel like, families can end up feeling kind of overwhelmed by the amount of details that they need to keep track of. And it's true, because we don't have a great system. A lot of it, is going to end up falling on them. And so again, I feel like people can sometimes put a lot of pressure on themselves, and that it's important to just remind people that the nature of helping an older person who has a lot going on medically is that there's lots and lots and lots will come up, and that you probably can't catch it all. And to give yourself some grace, that you're going to do the best you can. You're going to try to, focus on the most important ones first. And if you get to the rest of them, great. But I don't want people to end up feeling a ton of pressure, because we can, in geriatrics, uncover lots of things that they could or should do, and it just gets to be too much.
That's such a good point, because I often see these high levels of burnout in family caregivers who are trying to do everything and are trying to make sure there's never a mistake or never a lapse in the care their parent receives.
Yeah, and they do it because they care so much, and they really want the best possible, care and healthcare and safety for their parent. But it just can easily be I really think, almost too much for an average person. And so unless you have the resources, to get help, and some people do, they hire often out-of-pocket geriatric care managers or, additional people to help with these. But that's not realistic for everybody. And so, we always try to remind people, you're going to do the best you can. And that in the end, what's, I think, really important is thinking about how you're showing up for those interactions with your parent, right? I mean, that's, and then also taking care of yourself, which sounds so cliche, but that when you do a little bit more for yourself, you're able to show up in the ways that are most important for your parent.
So true. And sometimes I think that self-care is one of the first things that gets left out when it seems like there's too much to do.
Oh, well, I mean, for sure, it feels like it's not a priority. And so there, I think also we need to distinguish between being in a crisis moment, and that there are going to be moments where something's going on and you just have to step up and it's going to be really busy and hard and kind of stressful. But I really encourage people to not stay in that mode for months and months or years, because that's really harmful to the health of family caregivers. And so kind of recognizing after a while, if it's been going on for a while, that you have to, make some changes. And sometimes that's about setting boundaries, right? Sometimes that's about, saying, no, you won't do this anymore. It might be about asking other people to step up and letting them know you're not able to do all this anymore. It might be allowing something to be less perfect or not quite what you wanted for your parents. There are lots of ways in which people can take a look and, step back at least a little bit, but it's hard. And it's hard to not just get caught up in the constant needs that certain situations can create.
Yeah. I guess there's a parallel in some ways that we as parents to our own children have to accept that we'll never be perfect. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to do some things we wish we hadn't done. And the same is true if we become caregivers for our own parents. We have to allow ourselves, as you said, that same grace to accept those shortcomings.
Yeah. And just accept that often you weren't able to do every little thing, but, nobody really could have, or you can do all the right things and it still doesn't quite work out the way you hoped it would because your parents didn't cooperate, the doctors didn't cooperate, circumstances didn't cooperate. I think a lot of this is, that serenity prayer applies so much, to the care, I think, of older people, to accept what can't be changed and, to change what can be changed and know the difference, because often it's extremely unclear. And just, remind yourself regularly that you're doing, you're paying attention and caring about them and trying to show up and help as best you can. And the rest, we'll kind of see how it works out.
Yeah, and that's really all that anyone could ask of us as children, helping out our parents.
Yes, well, adult children often ask a lot more of themselves, though. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And of their parents. So, letting go of that vision that you can keep your parent perfectly safe and that they'll be happy and appreciate everything you did. I think letting that go. And then also in the book, we just wanted to reassure people that, if it seems hard, it's not you. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's really that this is a challenging stage in a family's life, and that unfortunately, as a healthcare system and as a society, we really have not done a lot to support. I think we have not done nearly enough to support older adults who might be entering that stage in their life where maybe they need more support, and families, and helping families step in to provide some of that support. So,
yeah, this is definitely becoming a crucial issue for us to face too, with the aging of baby boomers, of which I'm one. But as we get older, these are all issues that are going to come to the forefront even more so.
Yeah. So, well, I'm hopeful that once we get past COVID, we can revisit this question as as a society and as healthcare systems. How do we do a better job of supporting older adults so that they can navigate these challenges that come up in late life better and support their families?
Yeah. Well, one more thing I thought it might be nice to cover is that you have some tips for maintaining brain health when someone does have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So I was curious about those.
Yeah. And what's cool about the brain health tips is that they're actually, so people often, if they have been given a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia, they sometimes, get the message that it's not curable. There's, quote, nothing to do. But actually, there's often quite a lot that can be done that helps the brain sort of work at its best level. And those also happen to be the things that often help maintain people's brains earlier in life, in midlife as well. And so the ones that we, suggest that people look out for is, one, reviewing medications and spotting the ones that might be making memory or thinking worse and tapering those off if possible. Improving sleep if possible. That can be really hard if people have dementia because dementia tends to affect sleep. But there actually are some, proven techniques shown in randomized trials that can improve sleep. It's usually not about a medication or a sleeping pill. It's more about regularizing the person's routine, like when they go to bed and get up and making sure that they have enough activity during the day. That can help. It's making sure people have enough social activities that feel meaningful. That helps quite a lot. Physical activity seems to help. And then addressing cardiovascular risk factors like blood pressure and diabetes. That actually works better in midlife. It's not clear that it works once people are in their 80s and actually developing really outward cognitive symptoms. But, people often want to know, is there anything that can be done? And I think especially, if you can kind of create the conditions for the brain to thrive. So removing medications and, kind of toxins, as it were, and then helping people feel rested, feel safe, have a regular routine, and have enough social activity and physical activity. That really enables people to, their brains to work at their best level for that moment.
Yeah. And sadly, the need for social activity has been going unmet this past year while we've dealt with COVID for so many. I have friends who haven't been able to see their elderly parents for an entire year.
Yeah, it's been horrible. Really, yes, it was important, or I can see why there was this big push to keep people safe in facilities. But yes, so many reports of older people really declining mentally and physically for lack of activity and contact with their loved ones. So it's been a really hard year. Now with the vaccine, I'm hopeful that they're going to allow more visitation and be able to provide more social and physical activity to people. So.
Yes, it feels like there are brighter days ahead. So
yeah,
really
I feel like a light kind of coming out there, but
yeah, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it feels
right.
that way.
But this year it just has to be better than last year. So, and I think it will be. But yeah, it's been a hard year for people, and some people did ask, why I didn't address COVID in the book. The book does not specifically address COVID, but a lot of these, approaches, as we discussed, can be used for, if your parent's not accepting help you think they should in relation to COVID. But the reason why COVID isn't in the book is it was mostly written before COVID hit. And also, the COVID situation was just changing so quickly that I felt like books aren't great, I think, for situations that are changing quickly,
Yeah,
articles
true.
online are better, or podcasts, you can kind of do something timely.
Definitely. And hopefully, this book will be evergreen for a long time to come. People will be able to refer to it, hopefully long after we're not dealing with COVID.
I certainly hope so. In a way, I hope that nobody would need it, but realistically, that no one ever has to be there worrying about their parent and thinking, why won't they, listen or get help? But realistically, I know it comes up for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of families every year. And it's just, it's part of the life cycle that some people are lucky enough to end their life not having ever needed assistance from others, but a lot of people, might need. a little help. And
Definitely.
so I hope this can help families who find themselves in that situation.
Well, I'll remind our listeners that I'm talking with Dr. Leslie Kernisan about her brand new book, When Your Aging Parent Needs Help. And her website is betterhealthwhileaging.net. And it sounds like the website will be a good resource for people as well. Is that correct?
Yes. I've been writing the website for several years. We have articles on all kinds of topics, including, falls, what to ask the doctor, after a fall, medications related to that. We have lots of articles related to, the brain as well. We cover other topics. We cover lots of topics related to aging health and family caregiving. And then if people sign up, we send out, a link to a helpful article every 2 weeks. And we have a podcast as well, although we're creating a new episode about like once a month right now while I've been busy with other projects. But yes, we're always happy to have more people come and learn, because again, my goal is to give people the information and tools so that they can take better care of, their health or a loved one's health, and then, better get what they need from the healthcare system.
Well, I encourage everyone who's in the situation of caring for an elderly parent or who will be in the future, like my own children, to get a copy of this book, because it's a wonderful resource. And even if you work in hospice or home care and you're working with caregivers and family members, having the book on hand would be a great source of information for you to be able to answer people's questions and to help them find the resources they need. So it really is a wonderful book. And Leslie, thank you. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for taking time out to talk to me today, and for being a geriatrician, because we need so many more doctors like you.
Oh, well, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your reading it. And it means a lot to me when my colleagues think that it's helpful to families and older patients as well. So thank you so much for having me and for what you do with this podcast.
Well, you're very welcome, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Leslie Kernisan and learning about her book, When Your Aging Parent Needs Help. And as you probably gathered listening to this interview, I learned something really important through reading the book and through talking to Leslie about this idea of communication. And I mentioned the argument I had with my mom ongoing at her end of life around the throw rugs in her home. But Leslie made such a good point that we really do need to listen to our elders, and we need to respect and understand their values. And I finally recognized that it was really painful for my mom that I kept arguing with her about the rugs when I didn't even understand why she liked them, because she needed to trust that I cared about what mattered to her. And maybe those rugs were just a symbol of something bigger and deeper than the decor in her home. So maybe she needed to know that what mattered to her was important enough to me that I would protect it for her on her behalf. And maybe what she really needed to know is that I cared about what mattered to her when it came to making decisions for her at the end of life about her healthcare needs, not just about the rugs that were on the floor. So I never have finished telling that story, but my mom actually ended up keeping her rugs. My brother removed them temporarily, but she felt so bad about it that we ended up bringing them back and making sure that they were firmly adhered to the carpeting or the floor with adhesive so that they couldn't roll up on the edges and cause tripping. And she actually did fine with the rugs for the rest of her life. I just wanted to finish that. So in the end, I hope my mom got the message that we really did care about her, and maybe we didn't understand everything that mattered to her. But in the end, when it all worked out, we did end up honoring all of her wishes as she was dying, and then after her death for her funeral and memorial service. So I can take some comfort in that. But at any rate, I found that discussion about communication with our aging parents to be one of the most valuable parts of this book. So I hope you'll take a look at it and see if it's right for you. I want to remind you that I will be back next week with a brand new episode. So come back on Monday of next week to hear whoever I'm interviewing next. And also, if you like this content, you can be really helpful to the podcast by sharing it with other people. You could share individual episodes or just tell people about the podcast. You can also subscribe to it wherever you happen to be listening, and then leave a rating and review for the podcast, which just helps us grow the community of people who care about end-of-life issues. So until next week, remember that we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever happens next, and love each and every moment of your precious life. Bye-bye.